What's going on, guys? Today I'll explain my bike framework for programming for maximum muscle growth. Just like a bike has two wheels, a handle, and the main skeleton, which makes it functional. Of course, this is an oversimplification, but bear with me. A good hypertrophy program is based on two foundational principles, the wheels. They are volume and frequency. And just like how each wheel has those spokes, each of our two principles also has multiple spokes. So I'll first define some terms, explain what frequency is, then explain what volume is, and we'll end there. Sound good? All right, let's begin. Muscles are never in a state of maintenance, as most people seem to believe. Muscles are binary. They are either growing or they are shrinking. Keep this in mind because it will act as a foundational principle when I'm explaining the latter, more complex points. You might be asking, hey TDN, what actually keeps the muscle in a state of growth? The answer to that would be stimulus. Specifically, stimulus received from mechanical tension. Most people overcomplicate or hype tension too much. You can think of tension like this. The reps at the end of a set, the ones where your movement unintentionally becomes slower due to reaching close to failure, make the muscles experience the most tension. That is all you need to know for the purposes of today's video. Now, of course, if this involuntary slowing down of rep speed hasn't happened with you, then I can say with almost 99% certainty that you are not training even remotely close to muscular failure, which by at this point we all know is needed to build muscle. But while failure is a good proxy for ensuring good stimulus, you have to account for fatigue, pushing every set to failure. Not close. True muscular failure, aka that very grindy rep at the end of each set which ends up taking like 8–10 seconds to complete, is almost never worth the cost. This is because the stimulus it provides in comparison to fatigue, it's just not worth it. There are caveats to this too, though. I don't want to make things complicated for you, and thus I am oversimplifying a little here without explaining every nuance to you. If you so please, I will make videos on these topics where I go in depth in each of these. But for now, just remember that training to true muscular failure isn't recommended, although it is necessary to know what failure actually looks and feels like so you can gauge the other key factor, which is reps in reserve or RIR. Ideally, training anywhere from 0 RIR, aka failure, to 2 RIR, aka 2 reps before true muscular failure, will have you maximize growth without generating too much fatigue. Let's move to the final piece of the context puzzle, the rep ranges. Most people still believe that old-school thinking of 1–6 reps for strength, 8–15 reps for hypertrophy and pump, and lastly, 18+ reps for endurance. Now, this has been debunked, and we now know that anywhere from 5 to 30 reps cause muscle growth. But they don't account for fatigue in those studies. See a recurring theme? If you do all your sets for more than 20+ reps or so, not only will you be mentally clocked out by the 6th set, but you will likely generate so much fatigue that your recovery time will be excessively long, which isn't ideal. So, which rep range do I suggest? For the purposes of this video, anything between 5–10 reps is solid. I will be making a separate video on progression where I'll talk about rep ranges in depth. Just know that this is the best suited rep range for what I am about to propose here. All right, the context puzzle is completed. Now we can move into the meat and bones of this video. Let's first tackle the wheel of frequency. First things first, what is frequency? Frequency is defined as how frequently someone works a muscle region or group. This is usually measured in terms of 7 days. So for example, if you were running a PPL split, your frequency would be 2 times because you are the muscles twice in a week. Now, if you have been keeping up with the science-based lifting niche, then you might have seen this scenario cited hundreds of times. But for the beginners, let me put you on game. This study found that there was significant growth observed in the trainees if they trained 1 set twice a week, while it was found in another study that training once a week with 3 sets was enough to keep 100% of your strength and muscle gains, even in trained athletes. So, what conclusion can be derived from this? I'll give you 3 seconds to think about it. It can be derived that how frequently you train a muscle, aka frequency, is just as important, if not more important, than how much you train it in a session, aka volume. In that case, some of you might question, well, why don't we just train a muscle 6–7 times a week for maximum gains? And to that I say, this is the reason why. There are multiple mechanisms which affect what the ideal most optima. L frequency for muscle growth should be. Let's start with the first one, muscle protein synthesis, MPS. Right after a workout, due to your muscles having experienced tension, they will be signaled to growth. Now this signal for growth lasts in the system for roughly about 2 days max. That's why I stated earlier that muscles are either shrinking or growing. Once this signal dissipates, your muscles start shrinking. But it's nothing crazy because it is such a painfully slow process that you don't notice it for a couple weeks. But the MPS point was stated to essentially establish the fact that if we train before that spike has ran out, we won't be making as many gains per unit of time as we should. It's marginal as compared to having no MPS signaling and then training again. Keep this in mind for future context. Another big factor of programming frequency is fatigue. There are 3 types of fatigue: peripheral, supraspinal, and CNS fatigue. From these, peripheral fatigue usually wears off within a couple minutes to an hour depending on how dragged out your eccentrics were in an exercise. Supraspinal fatigue usually takes longer, about a couple hours or so, and even that is if you do higher reps. This is one reason why I recommend lower reps. The main problem is CNS fatigue. CNS fatigue lasts longer the more compound and heavier exercises you do. But even then, if volume and RIR are managed properly, CNS fatigue dissipates usually around the 24-48 hour mark. And so, if we train before then, what's going to happen? That's right, the fatigue will accumulate. This is why people program deload weeks in their programs. It's 'cause they train way too frequently, which results in the fatigue accumulation, and thus they need to take an entire week off of proper training just to set fatigue levels back to baseline. I am sure by now you know what the best training frequency is for your specific split goals. I won't recommend exact numbers because I have laid out the basic knowledge you need to frame one best tailored to your specific needs. But for the babies that need to be spoon-fed, 2. And ideally 3 times frequency would be best for muscle growth. 2 is fine, but 3 or every other day, aka every 48 hours, is as close you can push it without it hampering your daily life while maximizing the amount of gains you can make in the shortest time possible. An argument could be made for every 36 hours, but only the unemployed can pursue those frontiers. But if that's something you want to try, go for it, but don't go overboard. Learn about volume before you crank the frequency lever, because just mindlessly increasing frequency without adjusting volume is a recipe for injury. Besides, every increase in frequency and volume affects muscle growth exponentially less and less. I will be explaining volume in the next video, though because this video has gone too long as is. That's Wheel, one of the hypertrophy bike built. I hope you found this information helpful. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments and I'll happily help you out. All right, see you in the next one. Bye.